Growing up as a child, I was extremely small. I was very, very thin, and I had the blondest of blonde hair imaginable, and bright blue eyes. And I remember as a child and going into my teen years, I was so embarrassed by the fact that I had this blonde hair that was probably about down to my shoulders, and I was so tiny. I was a little bitty kid. And I remember as a child going into my teen years, growing up thinking that I was too thin and my hair was too blonde, and I was a little bit self-conscious about that. Well, I later learned that those were things that I absolutely took for granted, because as I got older, I then began to think, okay, there are two things that I'm probably never going to have to struggle with in my life. One of them is hair loss, and the other is weight gain, because I had spent the majority of my life very, very thin with a very thick, very full head of hair. So when I reached about my early 20s to mid 20s, so say 24 perhaps, my body just suddenly said, we are going in a different direction now. I remember in the course of 1 year, yes, absolutely that quickly, in the course of 1 year, I started experiencing hair loss, and I started for the first time ever in my life to gain weight. And let me tell you, that was extremely difficult. That was something that I struggled with very, very badly, and something I took very hard, because I had been critical of myself as a child for being so thin and having such bright blonde hair, to now going into being an adult, or a young adult, and losing my hair and gaining weight in the same year. And it was a really difficult, very hard time. I remember on several occasions calling my mother and just crying. I would literally just cry, like, what did I do wrong? Why am I being punished? I am losing my hair and I'm gaining weight in the same year. Like, who did I upset? And I would just cry. And of course, as a mother, that was extremely hard to hear. But I really had a very difficult time with it. And I found myself always loving myself, but not liking myself. And then I started to think, how is that even possible? How can you possibly say that you love yourself, but not like who you are? And it was a very, very difficult time. So probably in my mid to late 30s, I started to really look very hard at myself, and not just from an external standpoint, but also from an internal standpoint. And I started to realize that who I was internally was just as important as who I was on the outside. And that the fact of the matter was, I was going to have male pattern baldness, and I was going to have to be mindful of my weight. Now, I've never been a large person. But for me, I certainly went through periods where my weight was something that I was unhappy with, and I was having to work very, very hard to maintain it, and certainly not try to gain weight. And I also felt very self-conscious still, even so, about my hair. And that also was still a very difficult time. So suddenly, in my late 30s, I'm now, I believe, very close to being 40, and it just hit me. Bam, just like that, like at the flip of a switch. I looked at myself one day in the mirror, and I thought, I'm not overweight. I'm not unhappy with the way that I look. And all of a sudden, I really stopped and thought. I thought of one word: embrace. I thought, I am going to fully embrace who I am. I'm just going to embrace myself. I'm going to go with it, and I'm going to embrace it. And from that moment on, I have never had a period where I felt self-conscious about my weight, self-conscious about my hair loss, or felt like I needed to or wanted to change. And my message, and what I encourage each and every one of you to do, is to take a look in the mirror and just simply embrace yourself. One of the most difficult things that you can do, I've been told and I've read about this many, many times, one of the most difficult things that it is for us to do is to look ourselves right directly in the face in the mirror and say, I love you. I love who you are. I love everything about you. And when that experiment took place with me, I found that very difficult. But I can say that with conscious effort and over the years, I have learned to look at myself in the mirror and say, I love you, and I have learned to embrace myself. So I encourage each and every one of you to take a look in the mirror, embrace the wonderful, beautiful person that you are, look in the mirror and say, I love you.